to make sure that inclusivity and wellness is woven through each and every single program at BBYO. So why this topic and why these two speakers? So it's not a coincidence that these two women have been guiding lights for me during this entire pandemic. Drew is the director of BBYO's Center for Adolescent Wellness, and she truly has her finger on the pulse of how this pandemic has affected our teens and how we can support them. And Rabbi Dana Saroken is not only my personal friend, my rabbi, but truly one of the wisest people I know. She is the spiritual director of the Soul Center in Baltimore, which if you don't know what it is, I really encourage you to take a look at, Google it, find it, and what you will find is unique programming combining mindfulness, healing, rejuvenation, and growth, all with a Jewish twist. I am blessed to have it in my life, and you will see tonight just why. So you can imagine what a treat you're in for tonight with these two ladies who are going to lead us through some really important stuff. And then just want to wrap up that there's so much uncertainty right now. We're all in the same boat. We're all feeling it together. But what I hope tonight will give you is a nourishment in your soul to help you put one foot in front of the other and to give you the strength and to give you the confidence that there is no right or wrong to how to deal with this. And that tonight will give you some tools to support yourself, to fill your soul, so that you can in turn help your teens, which is session 2 coming up in a couple of weeks. So Drew, you can take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. Hello, everyone. My name is Drew Fiddler. I'm the director of the BBYO Center for Adolescent Wellness. I am thrilled to get to join you all today, even for a brief moment, and get to talk a little bit about just this last year and where we're headed next. You know, I think that there has been a lot of shifts and changes that as parents, you have had to quickly pivot and adapt to and live with over the last year. And we couldn't think, as the Wellness and Inclusion Council was thinking of how to really kick off Mental Health Awareness Month, the most apt and accurate way that we could think of to do this was to really talk about what does this next phase of the pandemic mean for you as parents, and what tools can we give you to care for yourselves, right? We all remember back to the days when we used to fly. They used to tell you to put on your own mask before assisting others in case of an emergency. And so, you know, it's vital that we all have the skills to put on our own masks. I apologize for the noise in the background. It's bedtime in my household, so apologies in advance. We are all, you know, dealing with it in various ways. So, you know, I think that as they used to say, we have to put on our own masks in advance, and we're entering a new phase of this pandemic. I don't think it's the end. I don't think it's, you know, a new beginning or a return to normal, but it is a new phase where we are going back, and our kids are going back and out into the world in new and different ways. And we are readapting from the crisis lens that we have been using for the last year plus. And the reason I think it's important to think about it that way is what happens to your brain when you are adapting to living in and responding to crisis, right? So we constantly, and our brains are constantly living in a space of crisis response. And we're not able to sort of access the long-term memory, the long-term planning, the really executive functioning pieces of our brain that we typically rely upon to make decisions, to move forward, to really execute planning in a way that we typically might in times of non-stress and non-crisis. And so with our brains already in this space and living in this space where our bodies have elevated cortisol and we're, you know, ready for whatever's going to happen next, because we don't quite know what's going to happen next or how to respond, we are now going to enter this new world, this new space, and this new time where, you know, we are coming back into the world and choosing the pieces to take with us and the pieces to leave behind of COVID. And, that's a challenging piece. And I've been fortunate enough to be learning a bunch lately with Dr. Betsy Stone, who talked about this idea of COVID keepers, right? That as we move forward, there's a number of things I am sure we all want to leave behind: the isolation, the loneliness, the grief. But there's also pieces that have been great joy in the last year. Whether that is finding a Shabbat rhythm with your family, whether that's learning to make sourdough or challah or, any other new skills that we've all acquired, whether it's, realizing that we can be on a Zoom call and respond to, and manage to conduct our children's e-learning and still order the groceries and still get everything else done. But there may be some incredible skills that we've gained in the last year, right? Stress is not always a bad thing, as we know from our kids, that moments of stress actually can lead to really incredible resiliency. And so, I encourage you to think about, as we enter this next phase, what are the things you want to keep, to take with you, that have provided you mental health growth, right, in the last year or so, in addition to the things that we want to leave behind and the moments we want to leave behind. And it's not to say that the last year has not been challenging, because it has. It's been challenging on our youth. We're seeing increases in anxiety and various coping skills, right, that are needed to be enhanced, and all different levels of needs from our youth and from ourselves and from our family members. But we're also seeing immense growth that comes with facing those challenges. And so I want to welcome Rabbi Dana Saroken and, really turn it over to her to speak about some of the opportunities for personal, growth, resiliency, as we move into some challenging times and moments.
Thank you, Drew, and thank you, Jen, and thank you to the entire BBYO community. I have to say, I am continuously blown away by the work that BBYO does and the community that it provides to countless children and teenagers. So I want to first just begin by thanking you all for taking the time to be here tonight. And I also would love to just get ourselves settled. I feel like, I don't know if you've managed to feed children already or what's happened in your home, in this day, but we're going to transition into a 1 hour, which is really just about us. And hopefully we can sort of close our doors and ignore any sounds that are coming, and just take this time to reflect, to think, to learn, to grow, and to connect. So I'm just going to invite you guys to put your feet on the ground, to sit in your chair in a way that feels comfortable, where you're sort of getting some strength from maybe your feet firmly planted, from your tailbone nicely planted in the seat. If you feel like closing your eyes, you can do that too. And I just want to invite you to just be. If you want to think about letting the day that you've just been through go, if you want to think about what it would take for you to get present, you can do that. You can focus just on your breath. And just try to transition to being here, only here, right now. Prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. And if your will willing to be a living sanctuary for you. Ay, 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 ay. Ya, da, 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 ya. Ya, da, da, ya. Ya, da, da. Ya, 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 ya. Ya, da, 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 ya. Ya, da, da, da. Ya, ya. So welcome. I'd love to just introduce myself by telling you a story. And as I do that, the messiness of our home lives, I'm going to just ask that someone close my door. Hold on one quick sec. Okay. So I would love to introduce you to me and to my life in this way. It was March 13th this past year, and I'm sure we all have our March 13th stories. They say that the way that we create memories is by remembering where we were, who we were with, and what we felt. Where were you? Who were you with? And how did you feel? So my March 13th experiences, as well as I remember right now, was I was home, I was in bed, my husband was beside me, probably snoring a little bit on my side. And I was on my device reading an article. And the article was from the newspaper, and it shared that the National Guard was just making their way into New Rochelle. Shout out to Amy Ecker on the phone. It was making their way into New Rochelle. And my dad, I grew up in Westchester, New York. My dad was in the town next door in White Plains. So I read the article, I paused, I realized that this was getting bad really quickly. And my dad is one of those people that is super high risk. So I called my dad and I told him I want him to come to Baltimore. I said, I'm going to come get you in the morning, pack up your stuff, I'll be there. So he called me in the morning and he said, I just jumped in an Uber. I'm on my way to you. And that's the end of the story. So my dad came, he moved to Baltimore. Well, he came to Baltimore. I have 3 kids. One is 17, my son is 17. And then I have 2 daughters, a daughter who's 15 and a daughter who is 12. And I got my dad back here and I said to them, we have one goal, one. Our goal is to keep Grandpa safe through this pandemic. That's all we're going to try to do. So my kids were pretty spectacular. 2 of them had the opportunity to go back to school or to be what they call IRL in real life. And my little one opted to Zoom. What that meant for us in our home was that my dad, stage 4 kidney failure, diabetes, heart issues, heart attack, all of those things had to be on one level of our house. My 2 kids who were in school had to be on another level of the house. So we were literally quarantined within for about 5 or 6 months. We only saw our kids outside on the patio with heat lamps for meals. Other than that, we tried to just keep everyone safe. So here's what I want to ask you to think about. I tell you this story only because we all have a story. And so what I want you to think about just right now is if you can remember back to March 13th, or whatever your equivalent of March 13th was. Did you have any goals? Did you think to yourself at any point, there's just one thing that I need to do or that we need to do. And this is what it is. And if you feel like it, you can put it in the chat. I'd love to see what you were all thinking about then. And then what I'd like to ask you to do is to think about if you were able to achieve that goal. Were you able to do whatever it was that you set out to do in this pandemic? Now, I'm going to actually also admit, I had a lot of good dreams at the beginning. Before I knew that this was like really, really dangerous, I was like, I'm going to go home and I'm going to declutter my house. I'm going to clean out all my closets, my garage. Like, I couldn't wait. It was like a dream come true to a working person to have 2 weeks at home, because we thought it was just going to be 2 weeks. Do you remember that? Maybe you had those goals. And by the way, one of my goals was I had like this laundry pile upstairs in my hallway. It wasn't until the first year anniversary of the pandemic that I actually dealt with that laundry upstairs in the hallway. But did you have any real goals? And I'm imagining, if you guys are like me, and I'm sure we all have kids in that same camp, most of our goals were probably to keep everyone safe. Keep them healthy, hopefully in body and in spirit. And I just want to say, most of us probably, please God, accomplished that. It wasn't perfect. It was crazy hard for our teenagers, for some of them. But I'm imagining that you got them through. So I want to take this time and just do something outrageous, which is to say, holy crap, we did it. Like, we accomplished something amazing. We have been at this for 14 months? What we have done is almost Herculean. So let's do this. Let's use the chat now and let's share all of the things, and maybe it's one or maybe it's more, that if you look at what you've accomplished in this last 14 years, it feels like 14 years, 14 months, that you can actually feel proud of. And let's put it in the chat, because I don't know about you guys, but sometimes in life, I wait for someone else to applaud me and it doesn't always happen. So let's applaud ourselves. What is it that you can really say, that you are proud to say you accomplished? Yeah. Yeah. And I think that some of these I'm looking at, I wish I could slow it down a little, but these are amazing, right? I slowed it down. Families all wearing masks, saved crashing children, cooked and cooked and cooked, learned to meditate, created some good memories, helped a father die, Courtney. Grew closer together. I love that I became a COVID yes mom. I love that, Jen. Yeah, built a garden. How beautiful. Got kids through, went for long walks, discovered things about ourselves we didn't know. Yeah, family dinners. Yeah, no one in the family got COVID. I mean, these are such huge accomplishments. Okay, keep going. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I used to think about the pandemic in these terms. It actually resonated very deeply with me and from the Torah. And the story from the Torah may be one that you're familiar with, or maybe not, and it's okay because you'll quickly be familiar. It's a story of our people, and it's the story of our people when we became, free, right? It's a story of when we went from being slaves in Egypt to when we were liberated by God through Moshe and went out into the wilderness. And the wilderness that our ancestors experienced was really a wilderness of the unknown. Everything was unknown. Everything felt uncertain. And the most amazing thing that happened to our ancestors in the wilderness amidst the uncertainty is that it looked so much like what happened to us. They went into the uncertainty and then they started to melt down. They started to get worried that there wasn't enough food, that there wasn't enough water, right? They started to hoard. And then they started to yell and to act out, and they started to cry a whole bunch, right? They started to sort of, I guess they started to really get scared. And in those moments, right, what they wanted to do was one of two things. They either wanted to turn back to Egypt, because at least they knew what Egyptian life was like, or they wanted to move ahead to the promised land, because that was going to be amazing. So the two options that felt most compelling to them is, one, to go back to what we knew, or two, to move forward to that which has a lot of promise, but we don't yet know. The one place that our ancestors didn't want to stay or didn't want to be at all was in the midbar, was in the wilderness of the unknown. That was a place that they couldn't stand. Now, why? For the same reasons as it is for us. None of us likes uncertainty. None of us sits comfortably or stands comfortably in the unknown. And so now what's super interesting to me is we're starting to move like our ancestors did, out of the unknown. We're almost moving to the cusp of the sea, which we will cross and move into the promised land. Now, just like for them, the question of what is that going to look like and what that's going to be, we don't really know. But we do know that right now, we're in another moment where we're about to transition. And there's no way to really stop that from happening. And by the way, like, what an amazing blessing it is that we've reached this day, that we've reached this time where we can say we have lived through, God willing, this pandemic. We did it. But now comes the really complicated part of making it into the promised land, recognizing that it's not going to be perfect, right? It's going to be hard to resettle there. It's going to be hard to figure out what life in that space is supposed to be and could and should be. It's going to be bumpy. But it's also going to be largely upon us to figure out what we will create it to be. And that is partly why we're here. How do we do this? How do we start another stretch of life with more unknowns? How do we go about taking these steps? Is it a jump? Is it a leap? Or is it baby steps? And those are some of the questions that we're going to deal with tonight. Okay, so let's talk for a little bit about something that Drew touched on earlier. She called it COVID keepers, right? Those things about this pandemic that we want to hold on to. And I want to just actually start by saying that when I'm not playing at the Soul Center, which we would love for anyone to come visit us at, I also am a congregational rabbi at a large synagogue here in Baltimore. And so I do want to just acknowledge that, that a lot of people have died, and I have officiated at way too many funerals and have had too many conversations with people who are truly dying of loneliness and aloneness. And those mostly, we all know that this pandemic has not been easy. It hasn't been easy for our elders. It hasn't been easy for people that are on their own or single. It hasn't been easy for our teenagers, right? There are so many people who have been adversely impacted by this stretch of time and probably have suffered trauma. And for many of us, as Drew was also saying, there have been really spectacular parts of this. And in some ways, it almost feels like, I don't know if we're allowed to say that, right? And yet, if we don't acknowledge what we've loved, we're not going to be able to carry it forward and weave it into our new lives. So let's go there for a minute, and we can use the chat again. And let's talk about the the things that we hope we can hold on to, right? The things that we've learned or that we've done, new rituals that we've created that we hope we can hold on to. And I share that in knowing that we should probably also just pay a little bit of attention to our bodies and what happened inside our bodies when I said that. Because there may have been sort of a stirring. I don't know what you may have felt, but there's something a little bit bittersweet and a little bit scary about moving forward. Let's see what you had to say. I want to hold on to less scheduled life, slowing down, long walks with family, less busyness, daily exercise, time alone, having family home, time with puppies, solitary runs, saying no, yep. Prioritizing home, being honest about our emotions, eliminating unnecessary activities and people, forced boundaries. Sherry Barish, I love that. No makeup. Going for walks, less stress with traveling. Okay. So these are some of the things that we've loved. And now the question is, my sister-in-law's on. She just wrote no more overscheduling. I love that. Hi, Holly. The question is how will we hold on to these things from the beginning? How are we going to create a new life without letting go of the things that we learned to love or we learned that we loved? Okay, so I'm going to move for just a moment, and I'm going to move to the new section, which is anchors and buoys. So when I started this pandemic, one of the things that I realized is that there are certain things in all of our lives that we need in order to feel anchored. So what does it mean to feel anchored? In some ways, it means that we feel grounded, we feel rooted, we feel connected, and we feel guided, right? We feel our strength. So I've learned over the course of this pandemic that my anchors are crucial in terms of helping me navigate anything that comes my way. So if I have my anchors in place, right, and if I can provide anchors to other people, then no matter what happens, I feel like I can weather it. If it's a raging river, I'm going to be okay because I can hold on. So let me share with you a little bit about some anchors that I am going to sort of say when we're talking about how we care for ourselves as parents during this transitional time. My hope is that these anchors will feel helpful to you. But I also want to say this, we all have different styles. We all have different things that help us. So I'm going to offer these to you, and it's an invitation, but please put in the chat things that you think are even better, or things that have helped you that other people can benefit from. Because at the end of the day, we're all just doing our best, right? To be our best selves, to be great parents, to be, good enough to carry ourselves and each other through. So let me share with you some of the fun things I found. When we transition out into the world, one of the things that I've noticed, and even just this past Sunday, I did a few unveilings at the cemetery. And it had been that for the last 14 months, as I was doing unveilings, everyone was like masked and distanced. But I noticed this Sunday, for the first time when I showed up at the cemetery, no one was wearing a mask. And they all did this. No one had a mask on, but they had their masks nearby. And so what they would do is they would sort of like make some subtle, motion to wherever their mask was on their physical being. And they would say something along the lines of like, Rabbi, We're all vaccinated. So if you're comfortable with it, we really don't need masks. But if you're not comfortable with it, we can put on our masks. So it became really tricky for me because I didn't know what to do, right? I had not yet been in a place where 30 people at a time were saying, looking to me and saying like, we don't really need a mask. We're all vaccinated. You decide. This for me was my like welcome to the new world. I want to give you another quick example. I'm showing up, the most beautiful, like widow. I mean, just a stunning, stunning human being. Love her, like love, love, love her. And all she wants is to hug me. And I mentioned I love her. Like all I wanted was to hug her, right? The next unveiling, a 49-year-old person. And there's the widow. And he just looks like he's like, all I want to do is hug. All I want to do. But I'm scared. If I start to hug, right? It's like a whole new world all over again. So all of these things are just small, subtle things that are happening that are reminders to me that we're entering into a new phase, and that there are instructions coming at us in some ways, but those instructions may not actually be the same as our gut. And we might not feel ready, and we might need to say no, and we might need to say, I'm actually not hugging yet, or, ooh, whatever it is, but we guys need to figure it out on our own again. So let me share with you first a little bit of Jewish wisdom. There's a beautiful piece of Jewish wisdom that says that if you haven't seen a friend in 30 days, that when you see her or him, you should recite the Shehechianu prayer. Isn't that amazing? So let me tell you sort of the why of that. The Shehechianu, that prayer, we say it at a bar bat mitzvah, right? I mean, we say that like, thank you, God, for enabling us to reach this day. How spectacular is it that if you see a friend who, by the way, mostly we haven't seen friends that you haven't seen, and I don't think it counts on Zoom, in real life for more than 30 days, that the first thing you can do is say, Shehechianu b'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. And when you think about that, what it really does is it elevates this whole relationship and this whole reunion to become something holy. Now, there's something else that I actually think is really an interesting idea. On a lot of our homes and our Jewish institutions, we have mezuzot, right? We have mezuzahs. Those mezuzot actually are reminders to us. The scrolls inside have the words of the V'ahavta prayer of the Shema. It teaches us, or it reminds us of what we should do when we walk on our way, when we teach our children, right, as we go through life. Now, I'm actually thinking, and I want you to just imagine this with me, what would it look like or feel like if when you came to that mezuzah on your doorpost, say you're going outside of your home, you stopped and you stood still for just a moment, you touched your mezuzah, you kissed it, and you thought about the next step. You're crossing over this threshold and you're going out into the world. Is there a prayer? Is there something that you need to ask for from God? As I go out into the world, help me recognize the blessing of real human interactions, right? As I go out into the world today, help me coexist without fear. As I walk across, my front doorpost today, help me engage with each other in a comfortable and meaningful way. Whatever your prayer is, when you cross the threshold of any place, take a moment and pause. Think about what you need and think about what you want to bring into that next space with you. Or maybe if you're coming back in, think about what you want to leave behind. Okay. more ideas for how we navigate this transitional time. You know, for me, one of the things, and I hope that some of you are already doing this, and I'll just share with you my practices that have been very helpful to me. Gratitude journaling is truly, I think it can get us through anything. The key to gratitude journaling is this. I always say to people, if you haven't done it before, start at 3 gratitudes. And then once you get really good at it, you can go up to 7, you can go to 10, and then you can just go until you're all done with your gratitudes. The key to gratitude writing or journaling is that you want to stay as specific as possible. So you don't want to say something like, I'm grateful for my family, right? That doesn't like muster anything. But I might want to say, I'm really grateful that my brother and my sister-in-law chose to be in the session with me when there were a million other things that they could have been doing. And they've probably heard all of my stories anyway, right? You don't want to say, I'm grateful for my house, but you might want to say, I'm really grateful for this rug that feels really like delicious underneath my feet, right? Really soft underneath my feet, or the blankets that just seem to be just the right temperature at night when I sleep. Right? You want to stay as specific as possible and get into the details. I always say that within every gratitude, you can find a whole bunch more gratitudes if you dig deeper. So it's always really interesting to get to writing and then to dig even deeper. I would say this, my gratitude practice is that I do it in the morning and I do it in the evening. If you had to choose one or the other, I would actually choose the evening. But it's actually a nice practice to do in the morning as well. Maybe do 3 in the morning and then do a longer journal in the evening. In terms of the morning, though, what I do love to do, and some of us were on Zoom last week with Shauna Shapiro, and this was, I think, a really beautiful idea that she shared. I like to do intention setting in the morning, which means I write down my intention for the day. And then I have this like sticky notepad and I scribble my intention and I stick it on my laptop, or I stick it on my refrigerator, or I stick it wherever I'm going to be most, which is probably those 2 spaces. If you can create an intention, it can actually help you, I guess, anchor you and guide you through the day. Sometimes my intention is as simple as stick to your list. Sometimes my intention is beware of yes. Sometimes my intention might be one thing at a time. My intention changes every day, but having an intention helps me get my bearings. It helps me navigate the day, whatever it brings my way. The Shauna Shapiro thing that I've loved doing this week is actually something that I think is really good for moms and dads, especially of teenagers. I don't know what it looks like in your house, but teenagers, well, first of all, teenagers are my favorite age group. I am wildly in love with teenagers. And I will say, and I noticed a couple of people put it in the chat that teenagers can be also really, really tricky. And they can keep us in our place and help us to see all of our deficiencies, inadequacies, and vulnerabilities. So this is something that I love to do. In the morning, what Shauna Shapiro said, and I've been trying it based on her book, is once I set my intention for the day, I'll put my hand over my heart. And by the way, it's really awkward. And you're supposed to say, or you can say, good morning, Dana, you say you. I love you. And you say it out loud. And then I like to see what it stirs. I like to see what it stirs. Because sometimes I'm like, oh, thank God, someone loves me. But also sometimes I have this like other voice that sometimes is saying like, well, if you loved me, why don't you go exercise? Right. I mean, I sort of joke about it, but I really don't. And the reason that I like have this whole story is because I'm making my kids breakfast and they're hanging out with me in the morning. So I don't want to miss it before I go to work. But if I'm serious about good morning, Dana, I love you, then part of that is also responding to like, what are my personal needs, right? We spend so much time as parents responding to the needs of our kids. What do you need? What do you need? And can you also take care of you at some point of the day? I know we're going to turn over to a Q&A, but I wanted to share two very quick things in terms of prayer, and they will be quick. The first one I want to do is I have a very special prayer to me. It was inspired by Annie Lamott, who's a beautiful, beautiful writer. She, whenever I feel like I need like a good friend at the table with a cup of tea, she's like one of my go-tos. And she wrote a book called Help Thanks Wow. I actually think that Jewishly, the structure of prayer is wow, help, thanks. And so I would say for anyone who doesn't have a prayer practice, right? Some people are probably like, I can't even find time to shower, much less have a prayer practice. But if you don't have a prayer practice, I'm going to give you these 3 words. You can write it on a sticky note. It's that easy. It's wow, help, thanks. And you fill in the rest. You don't need a script. I call it my creative Amida. But you really don't need a script. All you need is your, like, what's in your heart. You just say, dear God, wow. And then you look around and you figure out all the things that you can say wow for and over and about. And then you say, dear God, help. And it's amazing what will come out of your mouth, things you didn't even realize you needed help with. And then, dear God, thanks. And then it's gratitude time. So that is one prayer practice that I would say, no matter what you're doing, that's a really good one. And I also like a practice called Heat Bodedut, which is a really fancy word. Rabbi Nachman created this practice, and he said, find time to go out in nature and like pour your heart out to God. So I don't even know if you have time to go out into nature. I don't know what your lives look like, but I just know sometimes, you know, I do on a dog walk, and other times I just have time to get to my desk. So I would say that, you know, if you want to start or at least try this prayer practice, you set your alarm. I don't know, I would say for 4 minutes, and it's this easy. Dear God, hey, it's me. And then you talk and you talk and you talk and you never break. You're like that person that you get stuck at a cocktail party with who like just talks. That's what you're going to do to God. You just don't stop talking, even if you're saying, I don't know what to say to you next, and then something will come to you. So those 2 prayer practices, I hope, can be very helpful. Even if you stop in the middle of the day, if you start your beginning of your day, if you start at the end of the day, whatever you do, it takes about 4 minutes and you will feel so much better. Okay, I'm going to turn things over to Drew. And Drew, I think you have Q&A, and I'm hoping my timing is right.
You are perfectly on spot and on time. And I think, you know, I've been watching the chat, and I agree. Just so many things of what you've said, Rabbi Dina, really resonate both with me personally, and I think as we look at, right, the world and reentry, and how do we set, I mean, so much of what you said, how do we set boundaries for ourselves and set time for practices that bring us joy, and help to bring that back into our lives. So thank you for that. And just want to open it up for any questions that you all might have for Rabbi Dana. Feel free to put it in the chat, or to send it directly to us. As you think about this transitional moment and what that may or may not be bringing up for you personally.
And Drew, as these are coming in, I want to also just mention something. Someone mentioned earlier to me in a private chat that it's a little scary to feel like we might get things wrong when we sort of come back out. And I want to just respond to that by saying we will, and that's okay. One of the things that I've adopted during this pandemic time was actually inspired by Bruce Fiddler, and it's called an agility meeting. We do it in our family on Sunday nights, but you can pick any time. That just is the time that worked for us. And we get the whole family together. It's like our team meeting. And we talk about what went well last week, what didn't go well last week, and what we want to work on for the week to come. We keep it all in a notebook and then we revisit it the next week. And what I love about this sort of agility notebook and agility meeting is, one, it means like when your teenager doesn't walk the dog, you don't have to tell them on Monday morning. You just note it and it's going to come up at the agility meeting, right? Or if like no one is helping set the dinner table, you don't have to bug anyone about anything. No nagging. Goes on the agility list. You'll talk about it then. So it's a really, I think, an important thing as you go back out, because it also makes, I guess it makes the point that, that we're all sort of a team and a work in progress. We might not get it right this week. Maybe we'll do it next week. And then we keep on going week after week. Okay. I'm seeing in the chat, what's the best advice when your teen is overwhelmed with life and school and you feel that there's truly nothing you can say or do to help? Oh gosh, Lisa, I know. A friend of mine, Emily, who recently was teaching at the Soul Center, said she did something with her kids that I loved. She said that she used to have them spin around 3 times and then look at whatever it is they're looking at again with new eyes. I don't think we could get away with doing that with our teenagers, but I think that partly, Lisa, look, I don't want to give a pat answer. I feel like a lot of our teenagers, need real support right now. So I feel like for me, sometimes in my pastoral care, training, I feel like sometimes it's just sitting and listening and not trying to fix or solve or guide or advise, but just being present. That can really help. I think sometimes it's if you can get someone, to take a walk with you or, sit down and, sort of, change focus for a little bit, that can be helpful. And then I think sometimes another thing that really is helpful, I think, is when you share stories. And I'm a big fan of doing this. At our dinner table, we've gone to a sharing of something bad that happened to you today and something good that happened to you today. Because what we're trying to teach our kids, what I'm trying through this pandemic is to teach them that like bad stuff happens always. It's not just them and it's not just teenagers. So I'm trying to have us sort of recognize that bad stuff happens and then it's a new day. And oftentimes, as our tradition says, joy comes in the morning. Tomorrow will be better than today. I'm looking again. Josh Katz, what you just talked about is technically, rosebuds and thorns. We do that at Shabbat, Josh. Rosebuds and thorns. So anyone who's not doing that on Shabbos or anytime, rose is something like highlight. Buds is something that you're looking forward to, and thorns is something like a low light. I do like that. It used to be our Friday night practice, Josh. Now bad thing that happened and good thing that happened is a part of our dinner time. Someone said, I've heard it called happy and crappy. I love that. High, low, hero. Jen, I lost my dad to COVID in January. How does one deal with huge life changes and a lack of faith? Oh, yes. Okay. Jen, I would say, and I would say that I'm a really big fan of grief therapy. I think, I think there are extraordinary therapists out there that can be your therapists, as we go forth. And then I think that there are also grief therapists. I know here in Baltimore, we have our hospice centers have specialists that focus on grief. I think everybody who focuses grief, especially during the time of this pandemic, should have a few sessions, because there's a lot of guilt and there's a lot of emotions that can go into losses during the time of COVID. And I'm going to say, Jen, on here that I know that you're not alone. And I also know that it's a very particular kind of loss. A lot of times people feel like they couldn't be there the way that they wanted to. They couldn't get the support that they need. I mean, it's so profound. So what I would say is I would look for some help in just processing it. I'm a really big fan of creating memory journals where each day you can write down one memory that you have. I think that Mourner's Kaddish really works for 11 months minus a day, and just giving yourself time to grieve and to feel the sadness. A lot of times people try to rush through grief. But I don't think that you can run through it. I think you've just got to be in it, and to find those people that can support you as you courageously make that journey. And I'm sorry, Jen. Someone said that teenagers, we need to, thanks, Holly. I told my sister-in-law, one of the reasons that I love mothering teenagers is that I feel like you switch over when our kids become teenagers. We switch over from being like teachers to being cheerleaders or coaches. And I think that's a really significant shift. It means that like we get to treat our kids, with invitations or ideas like we would do with other adults, right? We get to suggest things instead of demanding things. And I've seen with my own relationship with my kids that is really, really, that's an incredible shift to make. So I always say this, like, if you're going to say something to your teenager, and I'm not really talking about a 12-year-old, but, as they grow older, I think you're becoming more and more of a coach and less, of a parent who tells them what to do. But I think that when you start to make that shift, the kids will feel it and you will feel it too. And then ask yourself, when you're trying to make demands of them, like, would I say this to another adult? Would I say this to a friend? Would I say this to someone else that I love? And if the answer is no, like, figure out how you might say it to one of those people, and then use that same approach with your kids. Good. Miriam, bad teaches us what is good. We do high, low, worried about, excited about. Yeah.
One thing, Rabbi Dana, that we talk about in the mental health space a lot is that, right, you have to go through some of the stress and the bad, right, to experience the good as well, and to experience the performance and the resiliency that you can learn from these moments. And I think there's been so many moments of learning and building resiliency, as well as, I love the idea of, for our youth, what are you worried about, or what are your concerns? And by, taking care of ourselves in this moment, by focusing on our boundaries, right, how we're setting those, we're actually helping to set a really nice example for our teens and the space for our teens to process, right? Because we're processing and we're opening the door for them to process through that, right? So it's a balance, and a really tough balancing act, but that by giving yourself that grace to experience and almost experiment as we go back, that in some ways you are helping to teach your teens through your own actions.
Yeah. And I think maybe just Drew, to add to that, and I love what you had to say, part of it, I think that's like, I think it's fun is processing with your kids. I mean, I came home yesterday and I was like, I did 3 unveilings. I taught a couple of classes, and it was really weird to be out there and to like really share how it's feeling for you, because I think we're all going to be going through this and growing through this together. But, to really like keep coming back to how is it feeling? I mean, our lives are getting really busy again. You might want to say, like, we're about to put our calendar back up on the wall. Like, we haven't had a big calendar on our wall for 14 months, and I loved it. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I got to get the markers out and color code who's got what activities when. I don't really want to do that. I actually really like a simple life. And anyone who knows me will know I don't actually like planning ahead. Like, I was made for a pandemic. I really think I was made for a pandemic, right? Like, I like to not have to worry too far in advance, but it's here. We have to face it. It's here, and our kids are ready to go back to friends, and they're ready to burn these masks. And I think in some ways, the hard part is that the blessing, not for everyone, but for those of us who had kids that were in reasonably good places emotionally, it was quite a privilege to be able to have this time with them. And now it's almost like we're gonna like empty nest just a little bit, because they're gonna fly. They're gonna fly away to their friends and to all the things that they've been waiting to do and yearning to do. And I think it's okay for us to say, like, it's bittersweet. It's bittersweet. But again, sort of going to that place of blessing, how amazing that even in the face of like this crazy, crazy, crazy time, we can still find blessings. And for many of us, it was getting to hang out with our family and realizing, that life doesn't have to be as crazy, and it doesn't have to spin as quickly, and it doesn't have to be as overflowing as it used to be. But again, that's only if we can sort of intentionally navigate the path ahead.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, and we have a few really fabulous questions. I know we're coming up against time right now. There are a few really great questions that have just at least come into me that I want to put back out there. One of which is this idea of, tips for making gratitude a family exercise. And really, the other piece I would say, and maybe this is a piece to end on, is, somewhere we're going next, which is for teens that are more reluctant to get back out than their parents, potentially teens who may be sort of in that space of worry, and maybe concern. How do we maybe help them as well?
Yeah. So I will, yes. How am I going to do this? Okay. Okay. Sean said, making gratitude a family exercise that we do together. Those big, like oversize, sticky notes. I mean, the huge ones that are like poster board size. Sometimes I just stick them up on my like closet doors or my walls, and I write a headline and let people fill it in. You can do something like that if you want. At the Soul Center, we used to do a really fun exercise. We had these beautiful jars, and it said, hold on tight. We did it before Shabbat, like hold on tight, let it go. Right. And so you might want to do something like that, like before, if you have Friday night time for rituals, you might want to put that big poster board on the wall and let people, write on there, 3 blessings or 3 things that they want to hold on tight, or 3 things that they want to let go. Or, it depends on your kids. Like my little one will still let me do gratitude with her. At night before she goes to sleep, we have a prayer and we say, dear God, forgive me for anything that I may have done to hurt someone today, whether it was against their body or their soul, whether it was intentionally or unintentionally. Don't let anybody be punished because of something that they did to me. Help me, God, forgive anyone who hurt me today, right? And then after that, we talk about, did anyone hurt you? Is there anything we need to let go of? And then we end with thanking God for our blessings. So 3 things that you feel grateful for. Again, some of you I know at the beginning wrote you have 9-year-olds and 14-year-olds. You got to know your kids. My 17-year-old, if I went to his room and was like, hey, let's do gratitude work together, he would be like, what? But I do think that there is a place for it. I just think that, it could be just a practice that you incorporate into the night. There's a very good book. Someone asked about books that I like. I like Bruce Feiler's book. It's called The Secrets of Happy Family. And what he actually suggests is that at every night at dinner, like you have a weekly instead, some people have a weekly, we have Taco Tuesday, we have pizza on Wednesday. Jen Grossman, that's a shout out to you. Some people have that kind of order. What Bruce Feiler actually suggests is that you have every night has a different activity. And so you could do something like that, where one night you do, everyone does 3 gratitudes. Another night, everyone looks at an article from a paper. You could figure out what you want to put in other nights. Another night might be Jenga night. You can figure it out, but it's just giving a different flavor to each night of the week. For those of us struggling with creating healthy boundaries. Okay. Healthy boundaries. Yes. I love TED Talks for this. Actually, my favorite TED Talk on this was Chandra Rhimes. It was a year of saying yes. It was spectacular. She talks about how she really didn't like to play, and her kids would always say, like, Mama, do you want to play? And she was like, hell no. And she's like, I love working. That's what I love. She's like, I love the roar of the engines. I love the creativity. I love the, and then she sort of works through in her book how she can say yes to play more, even when it wasn't like her go-to. So for some of those people who are struggling with boundaries, I love Chandra Rhimes. And by the way, for working people, I think I felt like I could really, really connect with her story, and you might too. I like Adam Grant's stuff a lot. I really liked Untamed, right? Glennon Doyle's book last year. I thought that was actually really refreshing for parents. It gave us space, I think, to be human and to take care of ourselves. And
Rabbi Dana.
yeah, sorry, I can't get to them all. I'm sorry.
I think the group has the bug that I have, that we can listen to you forever, but I want to be respectful of your time. I just want to share one quick story because I think it's relevant here. One of the real privileges that I had during COVID was that IC was all on virtual. And so typically Matthew would have been at IC, and I probably would not have had a chance to really sit down and enjoy some of the programming. And one of the things that I really noticed was that what BBYO had created was this safe environment where kids could share anything. I was truly blown away by how vulnerable these kids were, how open, how easily they asked for help, and how easily they took suggestions and were able to reframe things for them. And I have to say, I had very little hope that adults could do the same thing. I walked away saying, if only we could create this kind of a space for adults. And therein lies what we tried to do tonight. And I have to say thank you to Rabbi Dana and to Drew, who created this space where people could be vulnerable and people could connect and people could share their fears and say things that they may have been scared to say out loud before being part of this type of an environment. And I can't thank you enough for creating that kind of a connection, because I think above all, what we've seen BBYO do for our kids is that lifeline. And what we hope to be able to do for our parents is create a community where, when you don't know the answers, be it about your strength, be it about how to put one foot in front of the other, be it about how to help your teens, that BBYO is there for their parents as well. And so thank you, Rabbi Dana. I really, your wisdom always, I hear you multiple times in a week, and I always walk away learning something new. And we are truly just so lucky to have had you. And I think a great way to wrap up is a new technique I learned tonight is, wow, I am so amazed that adults at this age can be this vulnerable with people they've never met. Dear God, help me be surrounded by people that are always this caring, this compassionate, and this open. And dear God, thank you for finding BBYO for both Matthew, myself, and the community it's created. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight, and stay tuned for information on the second session on teens and how we can help support our teens as we go through this next stage. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.